Hope you can see my screen. Once you can see my screen, just let me know.
Yeah.
You can, right?
Yeah, I see it, Jackie.
S- Sorry, I was disconnected.
Okay, no problem. Let me check. Everything is in place. Okay. So let's start with the session. So, guys, welcome to Surat MuleSoft Meetup 30th. So this is 30th meetup, not a last meetup for this year. We have a one more meetup. So during this week or next week, so we have one more meetup. So in today's meetup, like we will going to discuss about a flat file schemas transformation with MuleSoft. So like we will see how you can transform a CSV file into JSON and JSON into CSV. Not only that, we will also see some data reader strategy. So basically, like if you have a large file, so what kind of strategy you need to apply basically, right? So those kind of things we will going to see with CSV. Then like we will see a single segment flat file, and we will see a multiple segment flat file. Okay. So also we will see how to write like flat file definition, FFD, basically in this session. Okay. So let me start with this safe harbor statement. So like both the speaker and the host are organizing this meetup in individual capacity only. We are not representing our companies here basically. The presentation is strictly for the learning purpose only. Organizer, presenter do not hold any responsibility that same solution will work for your business requirement. The presentation is not meant for any promotional activities. Okay. This is completely for learning purpose. So there are some housekeeping. So like recording of this meetup will be uploaded to event page within 24 hours. So generally, like I say 24 hours, but it will be available before 24 hours. Okay, you can ask the question, like you can make use of chat window, right? And if you like, you can like also unmute yourself and you can ask the question. And important, like we never get lot of feedbacks, so I will request everyone to provide the right feedback so we can improve in our future session. Okay. So yeah, that's very important basically. So like organizer, so myself Jitendra Bafna and Nitish Jain. Nitish, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, Jackie. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Nitish Jain. I'm all MuleSoft certified developer architect. I'm working in MuleSoft for more than 3 years now, and I'm working for Accenture currently. Welcome all.
Yeah. So I will give a bit of my introduction. So myself, Jitendra Bafna, and working as a senior solution architect 3 at a EPAM system basically. I have overall 14 plus years of experience in APIs and the integration technology. I am TOGAP 9.2 certified. I am MuleSoft ambassador, and I am leading three MuleSoft meetup group like Surat, Nasik, and engineering student meetup group. Like there are like I publish a lot of YouTube videos on the MuleSoft, and like publish a lot of articles on the MuleSoft and Anypoint platform. So I have expertise in setting up hybrid implementation, customer hosted Mule runtime, like completely cloud up setup, and also runtime fabric manager on EKS basically. Then expertise in application integration using API led connectivity and microservices. I have also expertise in integrating with various systems like Salesforce, NetSuite, ERPs, Snowflake database. And then apart from that, I also work at a strategic level where I define the strategic roadmap, which include migrating from cloud up to on premise to cloud up, upgrading the cloud up versions, or setting up the like defining their platform architecture. And also, I have experience in various cloud computing knowledge, and like including AWS, OCI, and Azure, basically. Yeah. So the agendas for today's meetup, we already had an introduction. We will go with like first flat file CSV format, then flat file a single segment, then flat file with a multiple segment, then finally we will have a trivia quiz where we will going to select a three winner. Okay. And the three winner will get a training voucher, like not a voucher exactly. So three winner has to fill the form. We will send the link over the email. They have to fill that form, and like they can select the training of their choice basically. Like once they select the training, they need to wait at least for 4 to 5 weeks, and like there will be the communication from MuleSoft side, like they will send a training schedule to you and you can just accept that basically. Okay, and in case if you don't accept it, I don't know like whether you will get a second chance or not basically. Okay, so guys, a few more thing if you have won the training voucher in last 1 month basically, right? So I will not say you don't participate in queues, like, but I will encourage like you to like let others to also win at least one voucher, so give a chance to others also. And secondly, like if anybody is new to MuleSoft, so like I will tell them don't go with MCI or MCPI training. They should go with some basic training basically. So there might be chances like if you are new to MuleSoft, like you don't have like you have just 4 or 5 months of experience, and if you are looking to go for MCI or MCPA certification, so like there might be higher chances that may rejected, but you can go for some fundamentals or some basic training. You can start with that. Okay. Yeah, let me start. What is a CSV format? So basically CSV is nothing, it's a comma separated file, right? So basically you have a file, that file contain many rows, and each rows contain a many fields, right? And those fields are comma separated, and each line can be can be a new line separator or it can be any other separator. Okay, so that is our DataWeave CSV file basically. The MI type for CA, it's application slash CSV. Okay, and generally with CSV, like you have a three kind of data weave reader for CSV. One is index, second is in memory, and third is going to use, that is the streaming. Okay, so by default, whenever if we are not defining any data weave reader basically, right, in that case by default will be in memory. So by default CS will load the file in memory, basically entire file into in memory, and it will start processing, right? So but it, like, if the file size is 1.5 MB, if file size increase more than 1.5 MB, it will write the file into disk, into local disk, or into some temporary directory, or temporary directory on the disk basically. So like simple, like if your file is 1.5 MB or less, by default it will use in memory data reader basically, right? If it goes to more than 1.5 MB, right, so it will use index data reader basically. So index data reader can process file up to 220 GB basically, right? So it make use of disk, or like disk, on your on your server, or on your worker or whatever, even like if you want to process data more than 20 GB, like you can use the streaming. So streaming is the fastest way of processing your data basically. Okay, so I will going to show you like how you can enable the streaming, how you can enable the index reader, and by default it's a in memory. So if you are not configuring any data reader, it will be the it basically it will be in memory, and if the file size is more than 1.5 MB, it will use the index data reader basically, which can process up to 20 GB or more data. But if in case data increase more than 20 GB, I will like suggest to use the streaming basically. Okay, so like there are some reader properties. So like whenever we read the file and you want to convert that into the JSON, so you can define, there are some properties with CSV of body, start, line number. So you are saying like you have a CSV file. Let me open one CSV file. So I have one CSV file. Okay, so you are saying, so by default, like you just don't consider header basically. So your body, this is your where from your body started. So I will be saying like body start line number, which is 0. If you have any escape character, so you can define that. I have some escape character basically, the character to use for escaping this special character, such as a separator or quotes basically. If you have any like except character with field or anything, you can just define header. So indicate like whether like header is present in your CSV file or not. If I take this example, the header is present, name, last name, age, and gender. So either it can be true or false, it is a data type boolean. Then also you can define the header line number. So sometime what happen, your header like may start with second line. So like so you can say the zeroth line is just space, and my header start from the first line, or sometime your header can be at the last, so you have to tell the number, where is your header basically. Then you ignore empty line, so there might be possibility you may have an empty line in between the some row, this particular rows, right? So you can say that like you can ignore the empty line, either it can be true or it can be false. By default it's a true. So quote, so character to be used to quote basically, if you want to put like if your data coming in the quotes basically, right? So you there might be possibility your data is coming in this quotes basically, like this, so you can say quote so what is the quote character basically, you can define that, then apart from the separator, so sometime by default the separator is comma. So sometime in input file your separator can be pipe, your separator can be dollar, whatever. So you can explicitly tell what is your separator basically. Okay, so these are some data view or CSV reader properties. Then I will go to CSV writer properties. So writer is a CSV reader. So you are reading the CSV and converting that CSV file into some other format basically. So writer, so you are receiving JSON file or XML file, you are converting that file into CSV. In that case, you will going to use the writer properties. So again, in writer properties, you can see body start line number. So you are saying like line number on which body starts, it is number, by default value 0. Then you can define a buffer size. So basically you can define like minimum buffer size. Yeah, by default it's 8192. You can increase that depending on your system. Differ, so generally differ is used when you are enabling the streaming basically. So differ is a parameter, generally it is used when you are enabling the streaming. So basically what happens, so once you enable the streaming, right, if you make differ as a true, so output from transform message will directly go to the processor, like it will not save to the disk, it will directly go to the next processor basically. Encoding, like you can define like encoding, by default it's a null, or like it is UTF-8 basically. Also you can define the escape character like reader properties, so character to use for accepting the special character such as a separator or quotes. Again you can define header, whether your in output file require header or not, you can say true or false. Header line number, so on which line number you want your header basically, you can define that. Ignore empty line, so if in output if any empty line is generating, you can ignore using this property. Line separator, so by default line separator is new line, right? So basically the first data will be written in first line, second data will be written in second line, right? But if you want some other separator, you can mention under this line separator quote, whether your field, like whatever fields you are defining, it must be in the quote. So by default it's not in the quote basically, right? You can do that. Then quote header basically, quote header values when set to true basically. Okay, so by default it's a false. Then quote value, so basically what is the quote value, like quotes every values when set to true, including value that contain the special character. If you are making this as a true, so you are saying like whether I need to put the quote on my header fields. So it will put the quote on each field or of your header. Whether I want to put a quote quotes on my field. So if you define this as a true, it will like put the quotes filled in the quotes basically. Then you can define the separator again. So I want my output file with a pipe separator or dollar separator or some other character separator. By default, it's a comma. Any question here?
The deferred once again.
Yeah, I will come on that differ. Okay, so I have a this is just an example. How do we set the properties to read if CSV file containing the repeating multiple record structure? Can you give me example, Ramkrishna? How do we set the properties to read? So you are saying like you have some duplication of records, right? That is what you are mentioning, right, Ramakrishna?
No, let's say if so for example, if there is an order,
Hmm.
CSV contains order information. Let's say
Hmm.
order header and lines will get repeated, right?
Hmm.
So basically, order will have a one structure. So basically, header record will have a one structure and line records will have another structure. But
Yeah.
lines will get repeated. and that entire header and the lines combo will get repeated if there are if the file contains multiple orders. So CSV looks like a it's a group of repeating order structure. So entire structure, header and lines combination will get repeated. So I see that kind of files actually. So
Yeah, you like in that case, like we have something called like it is containing some extra segments, like structure, like that structure have a different kind of segments, right? That is what
correct.
you are saying, right? So in that case, like we have some session for FFD next, like flat file
Oh,
def.
probably. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So you can make it, you can see that, like if doesn't clear your doubt, then you can give me that file. I can provide like how you can do that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Right now, data length, like you cannot set it here, but you can define the FFD. Okay, in FFD schema, you can definitely do that. Like so you can define, like I will tell you how can you do that. I will come on that. Let you go to transform message. Let me show that. Wait, let me message here. Why it's saying, yeah. it's- Okay, you can say transform message define. Let me check. Add CSV example. Yeah, in CSV, like you don't have a control on data type, right? So, so basically, you don't have a control on data type. For that, you require to define some flat file, right? Like fix with file where you have a control on data type. Okay. For CSV, I don't think like we have a control on data type basically. Okay. Okay. So next, I will come on deferred also. I hope this clear all this right. Probably we're going to use this. So let me use this some properties. Let me take CSV file. Okay, accept and continue. This CSV, and I can say payload. So simply like if I say application slash JSON payload, it will automatically convert your CSV into JSON format basically, right? Let me check what are the properties we can use from the reader. It's a reader only. So if your body start line, like I don't want to mention, it is starting from 0. Like separator is comma, we don't have to do. Like header is true because header is already coming basically. So like this all property is already satisfying basically, right? So we don't have to do anything. But let me do other way. Control A, Control C. Let me put this here. I'll make this as a JSON. Okay, and I will say CSV. It will convert into CSV. I will say header. I can put header here, and I can say false. It will not show the header. Okay, I will say separator. So the separator will be changed to this particular thing basically. Okay. So like this kind of thing, or let me check if we can use more properties. So let me put something like ignore empty line is fine, header line number is fine, and also I can say port equals to true. Let me check something is no, port equals to something, comma, port values True. Like you can see, like it put the code like values under the code basically. You can see that. Okay, so default value is like double quotes, so you can see that. So if you put quote value equals to true, now what I will do, I will remove header. So by default header is true. Then also I can say quote header is equals to true. So you can say code like this header has been also put inside the quotes basically, right? So these are the property you can use with this output basically. Okay, so like it's very simple, like so you don't have to do anything. Like if you want to do any filtration or anything, so you can put like filter, put dollar dot gender is equals to female. It will just select the females only. So that is how like you can make use of this. Is very simple. We will going to see some more advanced topic also. This is just I want to set the context. Like any question, any other question, let me check. Okay, no question yet. Okay, let me move forward. Okay, so as I defined, like we have a three DataWeave readers. So one is in memory, and like second is index, third is streaming. So as I mentioned, by default, it used the in memory reader strategy. CSV use the in memory reader strategy. If the file is up to 1.5 MB, like if it increase from 1.5 MB to 1.51 MB or more than that, it will start using your local disk space where your application is deployed basically. Like up, like so it will start using index basically. So index reader strategy by automatically, you don't have to define anything basically. Okay, so like generally it is recommended like we can process up to 20 GB of data with index, right? So basically what happens, this strategy parse the entire document and uses the disk space to avoid out of memory issues on the larger files basically, enabling the random access to the data. Okay, so you can like in memory you can use the random access, whereas with the index you can definitely enable the random access to data. Okay, when using this strategy, a data view script can access any part of resulting value at any time basically. Okay, so as I mentioned, when processing a string with a larger than 1.5 MB, data automatically split the value in the chunk to avoid the out of memory. And these features works only with the JSON and XML data. So it only supports CSV, JSON, and XML. There is a third strategy which is very faster. And like in case if you have a large amount of data, large file like 30 GB, 40 GB, 100 GB, you can make use of streaming basically. So generally only the problem with difference between index and streaming is that with index you can like access the data randomly, but in case of streaming you can access the data sequentially basically, right? You can access the data in the sequence basically. So this strategy partition the input document into the smaller item and access the data sequentially and storing the current item in the memory basically. Okay, you got it. Like let's consider it, it divide the file into 10 chunks basically. Then it's saved to the like somewhere like into disk. Then it will pick one file, it will store in disk, it will process, send the output again to disk like that. Okay, same way like it will keep on sending, like once it will complete all 10 processing, like 10 files, all it will complete all the chunks. then then it will send the output to the next out processor, will pick the output and it will send for further processing. It can support it format as CSV, JSON, Excel, and the XML. So generally, when like this is very important to know like what are the different reader strategy. So when you want to use which reader strategy basically, so you got the context, right? So streaming, if you want to process the data faster and quicker, like you make use of streaming. And when you want to process a large amount of file, large amount of data, make use of streaming. Even index up to 20 GB, it's fine. If it's cross 20 GB, then go with streaming. In memory, even if you are sending 20 GB of file and you are using the in memory like by default it's in memory, but once the file size is heavy or higher on the higher side, it will automatically change to index basically. Okay, so but there are limitation with index, it support only three format. There are like some limitation with this streaming also, it supports CSV, JSON, Excel, and XML. Okay,
have two questions.
Yeah.
Uh, First one is okay.
No, streaming doesn't happen like it just keep a chunk in the memory. Like if once the file, let consider I got a 20 GB of file, that file divided into 20 part, right? And it will pick one chunk sequentially. That particular chunk will be in the memory, not that whole 20 chunks. Once that chunk has been processed, that will go out of memory, it will pick the other chunk like that. So for that file, like it will be in memory generally. So there are some recommendation like for that it will be the in memory basically, right? Or like for it will be in memory. So it is recommendation like like you, it is simply written like you cannot, if any other format it will not support. Like so basically your mi types must be CSV, JSON or XML for index, right? Here you can see in memory DataWeave can read all the supported format using this strategy, right? So for by you can simply say even like you it in memory process 1.5 MB of data, you are sending that file of 2 MB, it will use in memory because index and streaming doesn't support your that file basically. As simple as that. If we have a large CSV file, but I have a few transform to group and filter, then create several CSV file out of its group by month. Which strategy can be used since I need to grouping to create individual CSV files? Will see Ahmed, like streaming always use at a source basically when you are reading the file basically, right? So once you are reading the file in transform, you can define any kind of logic basically, right? So like if you have a two transform message, basically for this kind of mechanism you can definitely use the streaming. It doesn't matter like once you like let consider I have a file connector. On file connector I mention streaming equals to true. How to define we don't define it, okay? It is by default like it's internal. There is some kind of there is a formula, like I don't know the formula, there is some kind of formula, it automatically works. Like use that formula basically. Yeah, I will come to Ahmed on your question basically. So streaming, when streaming you can enable the streaming while reading the file from file connector or any from HTTP listener. At that place you enable the streaming. Once like at that place your file is like started divided into chunk basically, right? So whatever logic you have a 2 3 data transformation or you are creating, so like for output it doesn't matter. Like streaming happen when it's reading the file. For output it doesn't matter, Ahmed. Okay, it doesn't matter. So like if you want to generate 4 file 5 file, you can write that logic, it can do that basically.
Jitendra, I have a question.
Hmm.
So you said that the fastest processing speed would be for streaming. Okay. So my argument is like even streaming, when take one chunk of data, you
Hmm.
put it into in memory, right, and then only you process it.
Yeah.
In memory basically it process it from memory itself. So if I have a data less than 1.5
Mhm.
GB. And then if I consider the speed, then I believe, in-memory strategy would work faster.
Yeah, I'm saying like for smaller file it's fine, right? 1.5
But
as I mentioned, for 1.5 MB file it's fine. Like then in that case what you can do, you can do see there are a lot of like you're mentioning like there are a lot of issues. Like let consider you are getting 20 GB of file, you are splitting that file of for 1.5 MB, 1.5 MB, 1.5 MB, right?
right, right,
That's what you're right.
right.
That is what you.
But, yeah. So no, my argument is like, if I have one less than 1.5 GB, then I can go for in-memory, because that
No,
would be,
less than 1.5 MB, 1.5 MB or less.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Less than 1.5 MB, then strategy should be in-memory, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
No, you don't have to define it. It will automatically comes. You don't pass the parameter streaming anywhere. As simple as that.
Ah,
Okay, if you
okay.
it by default it will use in memory file at the first. If your file size increase from 1.5 MB to 1.6, 1.7, it will use the index. Okay, if you are seeing like if you want more faster processing, you can make it of streaming basically.
Okay, yeah, got it. Thank you.
Let go more into streaming. So data will support end-to-end streaming through the flow in the MuleSoft. So streaming speed the processing of large document without overloading the memory, right? So generally it do some calculation like how much space is there and this kind of calculation, then it load the data into memory. Okay, so that's the one advantage with streaming basically. So it will never overload your memory basically, it will take care of that part also. Okay, so data we process stream data as its bytes arrive instead of scanning the entire document to index it. So generally it doesn't scan the entire document at a time. So like it like what like as soon as the bytes arrive, it will it will process it, when in the defer mode. Somebody asked me this question, please, this is the answer for this question. When in the defer mode, data wing can also stream the output data directly to a message process without saving it to disk basically, right? So what I mentioned, like when once like data is processed, it save the disk, right? Once the complete process is completed, right, then it will again aggregate the data and give it to processor. In this case, like it can give the data directly to the processor also without saving it to disk basically. Here it is more faster basically. Okay, so it will even not save the data. Somebody asked me this question, right? So let me give me a answer to that. So Ahmed, you can make use the defer mode also. So it will give the output like with streaming with defer mode in your case basically. You can enable the defer mode basically. So it will give the output to your processor basically from transform message, the output to directly to the processor. So like in case if you want to group, you can easily do that.
Jitendra, this is Ahmed.
Yeah.
So in that way, like what I was trying to ask is like if you do deferred, let's say I'm reading a big file, like, and since the grouping is done, well, you can only do the grouping after you read the full file, right? Because let's say the grouping is based on month, and that field can be like throughout the full document, right? So how do you, when you do streaming, it will be only like chunks of data coming into the processor, right? So how do the grouping works then?
It works like, generally like
Okay.
first it will process it, like it also do some kind of aggregation at the end, right? And whatever logic you have written, it will get applied. So you can definitely do the grouping also, like it does it, right? No, so let's consider like once you're like, as I mentioned, if you enable the defer mode, in defer mode what will happen, like it will generate a complete output and it give it to the next processor, in right? So you can, your next processor can be transform message and you can do the grouping there basically. That is also possibility, right?
Okay,
So
so
main,
you're saying the memory consumption would be still low, like we don't need
yeah.
more memory because doing chunks of.
Correct. And other like other thing, like so with streaming, like I forget one thing, let me think on that. So like there's a one thing like even when like let's consider you read the file. Okay, streaming mode is on that particular file connector. Then you have a transform message. On that transform message you can say defer equals to true basically, like I want application, and you can group, you can put your group by logic there itself, right? So generally what will happen, so like it will ensure that like the result is group by and like completely group by according to your month, and then it will go to the next processor basically. So it take care of that, like you don't have to worry about that. Yeah, data transformation also, like even it's a good, right? Your data transformation will also happen in chunk, and finally it will aggregate into a single result basically, right? So if you want to if you want to execute a data transformation on 100,000 record, it will take some time, right? And instead of you like perform on chunk of record, so it will be good, right?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So so streaming is not enabled by default. So the behavior enables DataWeave and Mule to process the data faster and consume the fewer resources than default process for reading and the writing the data basically. So it, see, in this case in streaming it makes use of in memory as well as disk basically. Okay, so like in memory it doesn't keep all the data, it keeps chunk of data basically, one chunk of data at a time basically. Once the work is completed, then it's sent to the disk basically. Okay, so it makes use of both, like so streaming is not enabled by default. So you can use two configuration properties to stream the data in supported data format. Streaming property for reading the source data as a stream, and defer writer property for passing the output stream directly to the next message processor in the flow basically. So if you enable the defer, so it may consume some kind of memory because it directly without writing to disk, the output sent to the next processor basically, right? So here it, but it is much faster way. Now it's completely depend on your use case, like what is your end file size, it all completely depend on that. Okay, so
Jackie,
let, yeah, yeah,
sorry to interrupt you. A quick question. As stream here, streaming is a file streaming, right? So
yeah.
I believe it read record by record.
No, no,
Uh,
it no, it
mhm.
it does. Yeah, it will read. It will be in sequential. But first, it divide the file into multiple chunks. Then it will read the record by record. It doesn't read the random, right? It doesn't have a random access to data.
Yeah, that's true. That's true because the streaming functionality is coming from the Java only. So in Java,
Correct.
they
You are
create
right.
a
You are
yeah.
right. I mentioned at
So
initial stage, right? It will, like, there's a difference between index in memory, and the main difference is, like, one of the drawback with streaming, it cannot
mhm.
randomly access the data. It will be in sequential, right?
Right, right. So the only difference is, Jackie, here is we are reading the file records from the file, and let's suppose we have a database. So in database, it will not pick the data in one go. It will pick using by using a cursor. It will pick the record by record. So if we replace with the instead of database, we are replacing the resource as a file. So you are saying it will divide it into the chunks. So
Correct.
that particular part is not really, clear with me, like how it will
See,
convert that chunks.
it will see chunk in the
Hmm.
sense, like, it will read 10 record at a time, 20 records at a time, right? It will not break the file actually, and it also maintain the index from, like, which is last row it has read basically, right? So those kind of thing has been maintained. It doesn't divide, like, it will divide the record, like, at one time I have to read 20 records, second time 20 record, 30, third time 20, like that. It stream the data basically.
Yeah, but we are not really sure how it will be divided
Correct,
in
correct.
chunks.
There's a
How
formula
many?
I mentioned. There's a formula on site. It is given on formula, like how it divide the data basically, how it create the chunk. There's a one formula I forget to put on this slide, but there's a formula.
Okay, so and streaming object is also will created in that case as well, like
Streaming.
in streaming object, like as and when stream will read the data, it create one object, right?
I'm not sure about that. I need to
Uh-huh.
check on that.
Yeah, because
Streaming object.
how streaming is storing the data, it's storing into the object. See, let's suppose, for example, reading the data from the database, right? As and when it
Yeah.
will read the data from the database, it will store into one object that is called stream object in Java. We are saying that. Okay, from.
Yeah, there's a something called stream value, they call it here. Stream value,
Mhm.
something called. So yeah, definitely, like, you are right. So they store in something called stream value basically. There's a parameter called stream value.
Okay, okay, all
Yeah,
right. Okay, so that is the only difference I believe, like in database, when we pick the data from database, it will pick one record at a time, but in the file there is a slight differences, like it will pick as a chunk. Might be all
yeah,
depends upon the formula that you said, right?
correct,
Might
correct.
be for 10 record or 15 record.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay, okay. If that is the case, because I bit confused about how
yeah. This is a Java streaming only. At the end, it uses the Java streaming only. You are right.
Right, right. So that's why I'm just a bit confused, because for database it's behaving differently, but the file it behaving
But
differently.
I don't think it will work for database, if you see, right? So generally, for database we will not get the output in this particular format basically, Excel, JSON, or CSV, or XML, right? So first, what you have to do, you have to read the file data from database, and you have to
Mhm.
save it to some in this particular format, CSV or JSON or Excel, XML. Right now it doesn't support, like, database will generally give the output in the Java format basically, right?
Correct,
It will
correct.
the Java object format basically, correct?
Right,
So
right.
first you have to convert that output into some this format, and you can save it to some local disk or somewhere. Then you have to
Hmm.
read it from, and then you can enable the streaming on the top of that basically.
So you mean to say the sorry, the streaming is mainly for CSV files or
Yeah,
JSON
it's
files
only supported
in
format. You can see that these are the only supported format. Index
okay.
only supports CSV, JSON, and XML.
Okay, all right. Okay, now I got it. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me go with some example how can you enable the streaming. So I have one sample application. So let me check whether this is the application. Yeah, so I have one scheduler, and, like, I have a read. So I'm reading one address.csv. So I have one file. So I'm reading from this particular location. So let me open this. Okay, address. This is the file address.csv. So this is very small file. So let me go to this MIMI type. This is application/CSV, and I'm saying the header true. In transform message, I am just reading this zip code and writing to some other file location and logging it. Let me start this application. Let me check what is there. I don't think any error is there. That's fine. Yeah, sis, you can definitely do that, right? You can definitely remove the codes from the, yeah, like in your from your input data. You can do that. Waiting for my application to start. Yeah, my application started. It's saying 1 minute. So it reading the zip code. Yeah, input address.csv, which is big one. I was it a wrong file. So it's a big file. So it is reading. So the file size is around so it's around 8 MB. So it might be use the index reader. So if you want to enable streaming, so basically you can add the parameter here and you can say streaming and simply say true. Okay. Yeah, here you will not find like whether it is using streaming or not, but in background it will going to use the streaming. So that's a way. So this is my file reader, and here you can in the MIMI type you can add the parameter like streaming equals to true. If it's a index, so you can say index reader. Okay, so that's a way. So I can say streaming true. You can save the application. You will see this is much faster than a previous one. Okay. So apart from that, like if you want to enable the deferred, so you can say defer equals to true. Something is wrong. Let me restart it. I see some issue. Yeah, but like if you want to enable defer, you can just make defer true here only. So let me do one thing. Let me remove this. I can see some problem. It was working now. Suddenly it's not. So like if you want to enable defer, you can simply do the defer equals to true on data view, and on the transform message. So any doubt on streaming like index or like in memory? No, console doesn't shows like Suresh. That's a like I haven't found anything whether So code property will like check whether like header or field have a code like value inside the code basically. Okay, it will check that basically. So basically, if you have a field in the CSV that having quote or not. Okay, if you are saying quote equals to true, so like quote, like you are saying quote, what kind of quote it have basically, then you say quote header equals to true. So my quote, my header has a quote. If you are saying quote value equals to true, my fields have a quotes basically. That's a like so differ like basically what will happen, instead of saving your output like at disk, it will like complete the output like and the send it to directly to the next processor basically. Okay, so it will directly send the next processor like directly to the next processor basically. That next processor can save into disk and like do the aggregation and then process it basically. So here it is saving the time here basically, so like again save to disk again, like then come send to write, it is saving some kind of time basically. And this I don't think we can have a code for a specific field. Then you can simply use that concatenation operation and you can add the code basically. You can just map through the field and you can add that. You can use the escape character. You have something called escape, right? You can make use of that person. Okay. Let me go to next topic. So like we will talk about a flat file definition. So generally like we talk about CSV, like there can be some unstructured data, like some fixed with file basically. So generally MuleSoft provides something called flat file definition. So you can write a YAML file format which is known as a flat file definition to represent your flat file schemas. The FFD format is flexible enough to support any range of use cases, but it is completely based concept on element, composite, segments, group, and the structure. You will going to see. So generally, like whatever schema we are writing, so that will be in extension .ffd basically. We will going to see that also. So we need to understand like so there is a element. Element is nothing. It's a basic data item. Let me open one file and I can walk through that. A multiple segment. This, yeah. So this is all element basically. One James, whatever, these are all elements like, so let me go next. Composite, like group of element basically, it can include other child composites. So basically the group of all element, this is known as a composites basically. Segment. So this one line is known as a segment basically. This segment, this is segment, so those are the segment. A line of data record made up of any number of element, it is known as segment. Group, a several segment group together. So right now like if you see these two segments, they are similar, right? But there can be a segment like if you see idoc, in idoc they have a different segment, right? So that group of segment is known as that that several segment group together is known as a group basically. The structure, so basically like you can have a flat file that
Marjo,
have a hello
I am, yeah.
Francis, can you please go on mute?
Yeah, sure.
Let
That's
me
not
mute
better.
him.
I'll take care.
Okay. So then structure, like the structure is basically nothing, the flat file which is made up of your segments, your like composites, all the elements. So that is nothing, that is the structure. We will going to see that. Okay, so let me so basically we will start with a single segment. So segment, like all the segments are same basically. Like you don't have, like if you see idoc, idoc have a different kind of segment basically, right? With if you are working with one type of record, you only need to have a segment definition for that record type in your FFD basically, right? So basically you have a like this is the segment. Under the segment, like you can have like n number of elements basically, right? So and but the thing is that all the segments, all the line of records are the same basically. Same in the sense like elements are not same, but the structure is same, right? So let me showcase one example. So basically I will create one project. So I will say file, new, mule. I will say single segment, flat file, finish. Okay, it's simple. I'll use HTTP listener. I will configure it. Say okay. I will say flat. Then I will use a transform message basically. So I want to generate a single segment schema. I will use a transform message. Okay. So let me show the file, which is the file I am going to use it. So let me show where is my file. This is not, yeah, this is my file. So it have a first name, last name, age and gender. Okay, so this is my file name, last name and gender, and I want to convert this file in this particular format basically. Okay, so what I can do, so I can use transform message, and I can define a metadata. I can say add, and here I will say employee add file and say create type. I will use the CSV of type. I can use fixed width, and make sure like you are giving the same name, first, last name, age and gender. I will say name, last name, age. You can define all this field, gender. Okay, let me check. Yeah, this is fine. And I can define the length. I want name of 15. 15. Age can be 3 character. Gender can be 10 character. Okay. So I have generated the file. I will just say select. If you see, it will generate one file, FFD file, in this particular employee flat file.ffd. You can see that here it's saying form fixed with it giving some ID, it giving some name. Under that, it giving values like name. I've defined the name, uses it's mandatory, and like type string, length 15. Same like last name, age, everything is defined. I will remove this transform message. I don't want it. I just use this transform message for generating the file. So now I will receive. Let me open the Postman also. So generally, like people face a lot of issue with CSV files. I like some memory issues, like memory out of exception. So you have to you have to ensure that like you are using the proper defer mode and like this streaming. HTTP localhost 8081. Then we have a flat file. I will use the post. I will use body of type text. Under that, under header, I can define a content type. I will define the content type of application as CSV. Okay. So let me copy this file. I will go to body and paste it. Okay. This is my input, but I have to define something else. I will use again a transform message here. And in transform message, what I can do, I can use schema path is equals to. So you have to give this schema path employee. So you don't have to give a schema because full schema path because it's the file is located at build path FFD. Okay, and you can simply say payload. Here you can simply say JSON. Okay, you can run the application, save it.
Jackie, by the time it gets deployed, there was one question.
Mhm.
We can also define streaming strategy in advance instead of adding parameter.
Where no, we
Like,
need to add like how file connector will we know, right? So we need to add that parameter of streaming on the file connector or any connector on HTTP listener. You have to mention it like like for index and for in memory it's fine. Like in memory file size is 1.5 MB, then it will use in memory, and it increase by 1.5 MB. It will use by default index reader. But in case if you want to enable the streaming, you have to explicitly go and define it. So my application is deployed. Let me send the request. No listener. I think it's a flat only, right? Yeah, I put the slash also here. Any other question?
No.
Jackie, I believe they are asking about the option that we have in advanced settings also.
Where
Instead of
where the
adding the
advanced?
parameter in the reading while reading the file, I believe that that is the one. Not here, the previous one, I believe.
No, no, like this is
So
this is something different
yeah,
basically. Okay, this is not for data view basically, and this is not for input file reader basically. That's altogether a different streaming strategy basically. Okay, so this is altogether different streaming basically. So if you see like by default there is some kind of file store streaming also, right? But like whatever streaming we are enabling, that is for data view basically, right? That is for file connector. Even we are defining on the file on the connector level, but we are defining for like for next processor basically.
got it. Thank you.
It's a scheme path. Let me check. I have like I put some wrong here. It's capital letter or small letter. Let me check.
Is it scheme path or schema path?
That's I think it's a schema path only. So let
Okay.
me check schema path. Have I put spelling right? Just a minute. I think it's small letter or capital letter. Where is my application? Let me make it small. Just a minute. What is error it is giving? Here I put this spelling right. Employee underscore. This is perfect. Just a minute.
Can you try running it one more time now? Maybe it should work. After the schema path name was changed.
Let me check. And I think it's a capital letter only. Schema path. P is a capital only. Let me do space. Schema path is not valid. Valid option are right attribute. Okay. I done no. I was wrong. So it should be
Yeah,
flat file.
I was about to say like maybe it's not working because of JSON.
Yeah. It because JSON doesn't have that parameter. That's
Yeah.
why. Yeah. So let me send the request. Yeah, I got the output. You can see that like so for name, first name I given the character like 15th of length. So like it will print the first name, after that all spaces basically. Okay, and then like you have a something called last name, then you have a age of 3 character, then like gender basically. So you can see everything has been printed out properly basically. Yeah. So this is a single flat file, a single element flat file basically. In case you can have a multiple segment flat file. So let me show that. So uh, this is bit complex. So you can have a multiple segments, so like so one segment, and then you can have a multiple segment, then you can have a third segment, you can have a fourth segment. If you see idoc, right, in idoc, like let's consider aeroplane. So in aeroplane I can have like header segment, like for aeroplane, like airline details, I can have a like header segment. Under header segment I can have a passenger detail, so there are multiple passenger segments. Then I can have a footer segment where I have to put the total number of passengers basically, right? So it's a bit complex structure. Let me show that. I have one flat file. I will show you that. Let me show that. Yeah, here you can see, here I have like something called header. So header contains some kind of dates and all those things, like flight number. Then I have something related to airlines detail, so like what is the source and destination. So this is my bcs segment. Then I have a psn segment, which is the passenger segment, which contain passenger detail. There is like it's a first class, second class, what is the seat number and what is the fare basically. Then finally it contains the footer, which contain total number of passenger. So I have to generate this kind of file basically. So we don't have that capability that with transform message we cannot do that. So you have to open the notepad and you have to write everything. So you have to know everything, like you have to write first form. I can write flat file, and you have to say structure. So if you see it here in like at the top level, you have a structure basically. This is known as a structure, right? So you will define a structure. Okay. Under structure you will define id. So you have to give some unique id. So I can give a batch request, whatever, you can give anything. So that's not like, you have to careful about your spaces basically. After id we require space, then you have to give some name basically. So I will give a name. And the bad thing about that, you need to know all these things, like you have to remember it. I can say this is my batch request. I will explain you. Then you have to provide a data. So basically you have to say how many segments you have basically, right? So basically you have to be a bit careful. You use the term id ref basically. So first id ref is rqh. So if you see in my flat file, right, so first id is the request header basically. I will say rqh. I will close it. Okay. So then I have to group this, like basically as I mentioned, we have a something called group. So basically now this is my header, and I have to group all this segment basically. So I have to provide a group id basically. So there can be multiple groups. This is like a single or multiple segments. There might be multiple structure, multiple segment file, right? So that's why we have to provide a group id. So I will say group id. You can provide anything. I will give this as a name as a batch. Then under that group id, so my under that I have a more than one item, right? So under that group I can have a more than one item. So you can say count is greater than one. You have to define that. So if you see, if you open this structure, you have a more than, like this is header. Under header you have a more than one segment basically. So you have to provide a count greater than, and what are the item inside this. So you have to provide those things. You can say items. Okay. So under that again you have to define all your this segment, all your this segments basically id ref. So the next id ref is, let me open the file. It will be bcs, right? Yeah, it's a bcs. So you can say bcs. Then under bcs we have something called psn, that is the passenger detail, right? You can define psn. Okay. Then I want one more id ref. Either what you can do, so where is my file? Either you can put rqf uh, below psn, or you can put rqf like on the same level of rqh. So because header and footer should be on the same level, so that is my logic right now. Let's make sure they are on the same level. I can say ID ref, then it's RQF. I hope these are on the same level. Yes. Yeah, they are on the same level. Now I will start defining each segment basically. So for that I will use segment. Now the simpler part is there. Okay. The first is ID. So which ID ref I want to detach. I will start elaborating like all those things. And I have to give one space here. I always forget this. Then you give a name. So I can say request file header record. Okay, you always put a single quotes, no double quotes works here. Then then you have to start defining a values. Okay, so this is bit simpler one. You can put this. Then you have to define name. So what is the name? So you can say record type. I will explain what is record type. So here, what is the detail we want? This is my record type PSN. Then I have to give no here RQH is my record type. Then I have to give a file creation date and file creation time. Okay, so let me just quickly define those things. So you can say record type, then you can say type, which is of type string. Then you can say length, RQH is 3. Then by default I want some tag value with name RQH. So this is my first thing. Okay, let me define a second type, which is a creation file creation date. Which is of type string, which is of length 8, and file creation time, which is of 6. I will remove this tag value. So I've defined my first segment basically. Now I have to similar way I have to define a second segment, which is the header record. So I will copy this thing up to this, copy this, just enter it, go below, copy this, and just you can say BCS. Then you can say batch header record. Okay, this is my batch header record. The first thing is record type, but only here I have to put a single quotes. And also I forget to mention one thing here. So my passenger segment is greater than 1. So I always have to mention count greater than 1. If you have a passenger segment greater than 1, you have to if you any segment is greater than 1, you have to mention that. Okay, so now I will start RQH. This is my BCS second of BCS. Then like I have to pass a flight name. Okay. Then I have to pass a capacity. What is the capacity of flight? Then I have to pass maker, who is the manufacturer of a plane. Then I have to pass source. It support all data type, number, string, everything, Boolean. Right now the length of the flight name is 20. Then 6. I can put 15 as my source and 10. And finally I have to define a passenger detail. I will copy this again. Enter. I can say PSN. I can put here passenger detail. Put this as my tag value. If you don't define, that's fine. Like otherwise it will be empty basically. So better to define it. Then I have to give a passenger name. Then I have to provide passenger age, then class seat number, class seat, and finally cost. So length can be 10, seat can be 3, this can be 10. I will put age as a 3. There's a one more last segment, which is uh, RQF, I think. It's RQF, right? RQF is request file footer record. So I can give tag value RQF. It can be any value, like up to 3 digit. You can put more digit also. I don't want all these fields. I just want total passenger. And it's of length 5. Okay. I will copy this. Better, I will paste it inside this only. Hopefully this is, I don't, sometime it goes wrong also. So very difficult to identify the issue also. Let me copy this. I will rename this. Even I don't rename doesn't fine, but I will do it. It's flights FFD. Okay. Here I can go and I can say flights FFD. I have already created DataWeave. I don't want to waste the time. So I have already created a DataWeave. So I will explain this DataWeave. Okay. Will show the input file and then I will explain it. So just let me change this to flights.ffd. So here what I'm doing, like this is my input. Where is my input? This is my input. So here I have coming input flight name, like passenger details, all those things. So this is coming as an input XML, and I want to convert this XML into flat file. So here I'm saying this is my RQH is the header. I'm reading the file creation date and the file creation time, as a system time. Then we have a batch, right? So if you see flat file, we are starting with batch. So if you see it here, we have something called batch somewhere. Yeah, group ID is batch. So we need to give that. This is the top level segment. Under that we have a BCS, PSN, RQF, and we are just mapping this details from the that input XML. It's simple. So let me save it. Let me copy this XML. Hopefully this will work. I will change this to XML. Okay. I will change this. I will remove this on here. So let me see if application deployed or not. Let me send the request. Missing structures, data 0, group ID. Let me check what is missing. It always happens. So let me check. Structure is fine, ID batch request is fine, name batch request is fine, data is fine, ID ref, group ID, batch is fine, count. Yeah, this count, it should not be like this. This is the one problem. Items ID ref, these are fine. Let me check if it's work. Effective length 7 is greater than 6 for the component maker. Let me check. It's good, like, so I think what has happened for maker. Yeah,
Yeah, man.
I got it. Yeah, it should be because we are getting the length more, right? We have defined the less length, so that is the reason. So even source I can define as a 10. Let me check. That's fine. So yeah, generally we should get the error, right? So wait, basically what is happening? I define the length for maker is 6. Actually, in input file it is coming as a 7th basically. So that's why. So no issue on that. So I just increase the length. Okay, hopefully this time it works. Yeah, we got the output. You can see that in the require format basically. So where you can have a request header with time of creation and date and time of creation. We got batch header with airlines detail, like what is the air and what is the source and destination. Then we got a passenger details and what is the total number of passengers. We got all these details. So that is how you can make use of like multiple segments. That is how you can write the flat file for the multiple segments basically. Yeah, so that's all about like flat files. So if you have any question you can let me know, otherwise we can start with quiz basically. I think let me check so what I got your question. So if you can put in this array, right, where we are talking, I've used the map operator. You can see in passenger, like for iterating through the passenger, I've used the map operator here. So you have to use it, right? So you cannot do it directly. Got it, Ahmed? I have to use the map operator. Yeah, yeah, DataWeave, I can share it. I can share the FFD file also. So how can I can copy it here. This is not coming. I will mail it. Okay. So I will mail after this session. I will mail all this thing to you basically. Don't worry. Okay. Yeah. So anybody have any question, like so guys, I try to cover a lot of things, so I try my best to give the session. This is bit complex topic, like it required a lot of practice basically, like this, creating this flat file, so FFD is not that easy task basically, so you need to do a lot of practice basically. Yeah. Okay.
Hi, Jitendra. Jitendra, one
Yeah,
question.
yeah, Pradeep, go on.
In the single segment, if I want to convert my .txt data into JSON or C, do this.
You can directly send the input. You can read the, you can have a file connector, right? You read the file connector. So txt is in like which format basically? It's a c
Single
whatever
segment, yeah. Single
single
segment.
segment, no?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
fine, like you can like you can definitely read the txt as a file connector. Whatever payload is there, right? You can apply that schema on that payload and it will convert in the required, whether you want in flat file or whether you want in any other format, it will do it, Pradeep. You just have to make sure like you have defined the proper schema. It doesn't matter your file is .txt or .csv or any other format.
As before, like when you are writing application slash JSON, it was throwing some error, right? So,
Yeah, yeah, that will true, right? Because you can
hmm,
apply the FFD to the flat file, right? If you want to
hmm,
generate flat file, you can apply
hmm,
the because schema path is the property which is supported to only MMI type application slash flat file,
hmm,
right?
okay. Yeah, right, correct. So let's
That's why
suppose,
that is not
mhm.
working.
Let's suppose I having requirement in .txt file. I having some account data, okay,
Mhm.
some name, country code. Let's suppose like so I want to convert into first into JSON, and after converting into insert all these data individually in my database. So how can you do
I
this? Like after,
simple like
hmm,
simple, it's simple like basically like instead of output
hmm,
it's simple like what you have to do it. So
hmm,
basically you are reading the file from some file connector, right? So file
dot
connector.
yeah dot txt, yeah.
Let's consider you are reading from
Yeah.
file connector, right? Let you are
Mm-hmm.
reading. I'm just giving example. You can do it anything, okay?
Yes, yes.
So in advance,
Hmm.
not in advance, in MIMI type, okay, you can add the parameter here. So you can say schema path, okay, and give that as FFD file like employee dot FFD, okay.
Hmm.
So it will apply. So let's consider if txt file is coming, right, as an input, and you want
Hmm.
to convert into some other flat file, right? Or like,
Hmm.
okay, or you want to convert that into JSON, right? Simply,
Hmm.
right? So here you can mention like, application slash JSON or something like that. Here you want to mention application slash MMI. Let me, like, I'm showing it. Application slash flat file. You have to just select application slash flat file. You are saying this is my schema path basically, okay. And in this transformation you just simply say application JSON, and you can simply say payload, like, it will do it. Here you have to
Okay.
just
Hmm.
mention like where is your schema located. It have to first match with your schema basically,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah,
So
got it.
while reading you have to just tell what is your schema basically, and what is your MIMI type. This is the input parameter, or otherwise simply you can do here in DataWeave. So
Hmm.
input, you can define your input, input, input from or something like that, you can define input application slash flat file, okay. You here you can define schema path like that, okay. You can define, and your want output in the, you can say JSON, and you can remove this schema path. So you are saying my input is in this format and I want to convert this into the JSON basically.
Okay, okay. Yeah, this seems great. Yeah, got it.
You have to do something like, and then you have to write the proper maps, okay. So that you have to take care.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
have to
got it.
write the mapping in this way basically, you have to write that map, okay. So but you can
Hmm.
define the input from, input, it's input, yeah, it's input from, I think. So you can write that, and you will like, and you define the schema path. Even you don't have to define anything here, okay. You can ignore that.
Okay, okay.
Any other question?
Hey Jitendra. So instead of FFD, can we use copybook?
uh it is for COBOL, I think. Copybook is for COBOLs, right?
Yeah.
You can use for COBOL basically. For COBOL, let me check. What coffee?
So in my case, right, so I'm getting a dot file in my input data. So initially I was writing as a copybook, using the FFD file uh, for the transformation.
You
But
can use the copybook, right? Generally copybook is for COBOL. That is the some COBOL format, right? So that is for COBOL basically, correct? The copybook is the format generated from as a COBOL basically, COBOL output in dot date format or some other dot CPY format, right? So
yeah, yeah,
yeah, like you can definitely use that, but you have to ensure that, like, so whatever. But the problem with copybook, you don't have a concept of segments and all those things, right? You don't have that
yeah.
concept.
That's
So where it
yeah,
will
that's the
fail.
problem. So coming, yeah. So then finally I came, so one of the requirement came to me is a multiple segment. So then I use FFD instead of copybook. So that's why I have asked you, or
No,
is
no,
there any way to we can use?
no, you have to use the FFD. MuleSoft provide only one thing, like that is the FFD. Okay, copybook is generally whenever the output generated from COBOL, right? And you want to generate the schema for
Mhm.
that, then you can use the copybook, right? But for FFD, like if you have something called you have multiple segments or multiple structure, right? You have a complex
Mhm.
segments and complex structure. In that case, you have only have option to use FFD basically.
Okay. So this FFD flat files and fixed with
Yeah, fixed with.
files,
See,
right?
flat file and fixed with is same only. It's the same thing. Okay, it's the same thing. Like,
Okay, okay.
yeah. So Arun, streaming, as I mentioned,
Thank
like
you.
streaming and defer can be worked, like they work together. So what is happen, like when you enable the streaming equals to true, So like it will just divide the data into chunk and it will process like data in the chunk basically, right? So like in case of differ, what will happen as soon as data process, if you enable differ equals to true, it will go to next processor directly instead of like saving into the disk. So that one step will be reduced basically in between. Okay. So like Nitish is up. It's I will give a control to you.
Thank you, Jackie. It was a really great session. Many new things. I guess we all got today. Thanks again. Okay. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible.
Okay.
You go
Okay.
on.
Okay. Yeah.
So guys,
Okay.
if you can on the camera, it will be good, you know. So
Okay.
I will on
So.
first my camera.
Okay. Okay. I'm sharing the Kahoot URL, guys. I'm sharing my screen now. Please let me know once you can see it.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you. So, guys, we are going to play the quiz with Kahoot. So we require two screens, one where you'll see the questions and second where you'll answer the questions. So here you will get a question over here. You'll see the timer. You'll get options in colors, and from the second screen, maybe your phone. It's preferable if you use a phone. If you have other laptop, so you need to choose this via colors. This is not exact game pin. I'll just share it. Okay, so here it is. 2104428.
So guys, you have 3 minutes. So it's we will log the game in 3 minutes.
Z, can you please rejoin with your actual name so that there won't be any issue?
We have a more 9 people to join.
So I'll ask again for Z and Tamil. So I hope you are using your short names.
So we can play this game in our laptop
Yes, yes, you can play it.
or
Ye- Uh, but I'll say you require two screens. It's fine if you're using two laptops. You can just, if you don't have two laptops, join with phone. Just Google it, Kahoot. It will take you over here. Give the game pin, enter your name, and you'll be here. You can see your name
Guys,
on the
one
screen.
more minute. One
Yeah.
more minute. Guys, please on the camera. I will stop recording Nitish, okay?
Yeah, sure.